After Further Review is the name of the show. It is heard throughout the state of Louisiana, originating from there in Baton Rouge on ESPN Radio. He is Matt Moscona. You can follow him on Twitter there at Matt Moscona. Welcome in, Matt. I hope you're doing well today.
A gallon every day, fellas. You got to have a gallon of water every day.
I make a run at it, man. I try my best.
Have you ever seen Nate Oates drink water? I mean, that guy attacks it. He does. Attacks every time he comes on the show, he'll answer a question that's.
I just needed to clean my palate, wet the whistle before we started. So, but I'm happy to spread the good news about water drinking.
Matt is with us on the JohnstonRVCenter.com hotline. So we are being told to tap the brakes, just as pull back the curtain a little bit. 67 members of our audience. We had a ton of people that applied to vote. We picked 67. It's a cross section. It's not like all Bama fans, all Auburn fans. They voted LSU number 5. I think we all think it might be a touch low. Some are saying tap the brakes. I assume in Tigerland, number 5 might be the bare minimum this year.
Are you talking about 5 in the West or 5 in the league?
5 in the league. 5 in the nation.
Oh, 5 in the nation.
Yeah.
Oh, no, that's about right.
Yeah.
I think. Well, I was about to say, man, fifth in the league. Wow. No. Fifth in the nation, I think, is probably about right. LSU still has to establish consistency. They did lose, a landslide game at home to Tennessee. They were embarrassed on the road by a previously 4-win Texas A&M team. And I think clearly in the SEC championship game, while there were good moments, they were punching above their weight against Georgia. So LSU still has a lot to prove by way of progressing. I think rightfully you'd look at teams like Georgia, Michigan that belong up there. You could make a case for Florida State, Alabama, USC nationally for all in those conversations. But I think mostly when I look at it, I go, who is established at quarterback? Who has the fewest questions against a manageable schedule? And I think LSU checks those boxes, which is why there's going to be a lot of optimism around them this year.
Yeah, look, when I look at LSU's skill that they've got coming back, it's some of the best in the nation. If there is a weakness with a unit on this team, where would you point to?
LSU, really good at cornerback forever. Brian Kelly came in, had to remake that cornerback room with transfers. They were all one-year guys. They played well, but they have one returning scholarship cornerback from a year ago. So had to go back into the portal this year. They signed 4 transfer corners. I would say all of them by star rating, NFL ceiling, all are more talented than the guys they had a year ago. But how does that room factor? Who ends up starting? How do they work together? I mean, all that is still to be determined. So that if there's one giant question, it's at cornerback.
I always wonder, like Alabama and other great programs, there's always, benchmarks that have been set in the past. How often does 2011 LSU's defense get brought up, which was a fantastic defense, in my opinion, one of the best I've ever seen? And does this team, with its starting 11, have some characteristics that 2011 team had?
Man, nobody wants to talk about 2011 ever. That's a curse word around here, man. January 9th, 2012 is like doomsday. I mean, look, you're right. 2011 was they were magnificent. I mean, the All-Americans all over the field. They were just dominant. We all remember the 9-6 game. But I don't know if this defense mirrors that one. And I would tell you the differentiator, I would say, would be at defensive end, where you had on that team Sam Montgomery and Barkevious Mingo, who were both All-American edge rushers. This team has yet to prove it has those guys. And remember, I know everybody's going to bring up Harold Perkins, and well, what a freshman year he had. And he's just such an exciting player. But Perkins is moving inside this year. Now, he's still going to play that jack position some of the time, but primarily he's going to be an inside linebacker. So they're going to have to generate that pass rush from guys who we don't know yet if they're going to be able to do it. So I think that's the one. If there's one big difference from that defense and this one, it would be there on the edge.
Matt Moscona with us from down at Baton Rouge, ESPN Radio throughout the state of Louisiana. At Matt Moscona on Twitter. He is with us on the JohnstonRVCenter.com hotline. How big of an emphasis, if at all, is it for the offense to not have Jaden Daniels be the leading rusher?
Oh, it's huge. That's a very, very, very good point. last year, especially for the first half of the season, some of LSU's best offense was, hey, plays breaking down, Jaden run. I mean, literally the first play of LSU's season last year against Florida State, he eluded a blitz, protection broke down, he scrambled around left end for 25 yards. Jaden Daniels was the leading rusher out of necessity. Now, LSU went through 6 different offensive line combinations in their first 8 games a year ago. This year, they returned 6 of their top 7 linemen. They brought in a transfer from Maryland, a guy named Mason Lunsford, who's played 40 games. And their top-rated signee was Lance Hurd, who's a 5-star offensive tackle. So with the offensive line more steadied, LSU brought in Logan Diggs, a running back from Notre Dame, who Brian Kelly recruited out of New Orleans to South Bend, and now has him back at LSU. They got 6 running backs they like. I think that is as big a piece of this offense as quite literally anything, because LSU doesn't need Jaden Daniels to be a 1,000-yard rusher, and that should keep him healthy, and it should free him up more in the passing game.
Coming out of spring camp, Brian Kelly was asked, how do you feel about your roster? And he said, 1 through 22, I like it a lot, but I don't know about the depth. How big of a concern is the depth on this team?
I read that quote from Brian Kelly as well. We talked about it on the show here. I don't know if he's being coy. And listen, I'll give Brian Kelly a ton of credit. I was thinking about this morning. There's a lot of coaches that are just notoriously close to the vest. They don't want to give you anything on injuries, on depth, on who's going to be a starter at this position. Brian Kelly's transparent. You ask him a question, he'll tell you the answer. So maybe he does believe that, and he certainly knows his team better than us. But guys, I would have said, look, last year, I'll give you an example. Last year, LSU rotated 3 defensive tackles. 3. All year, they had 3 true defensive tackles that played. It's stunning. Now, you've got Mason Smith coming back off of injury, and they added 3 Power 5 defensive tackles. Where they were thinnest a year ago, they went and addressed it with dudes that are proven, established Power 5 players. We just talked about the offensive line. You've got 2 quarterbacks you really like. LSU's always got good receivers. I mean, I don't know where Brian Kelly has the questions or concerns about the depth. We talked about corner, and I think that's fair. Maybe we could talk about safety as well, where after your starters, you're not sure how it shakes out. But I mean, guys, the reason where we started today, you asked me if LSU is worthy of being a top 5 team. I mean, the reason they are is because they don't have a lot of questions. And maybe the roster isn't where Brian Kelly would ideally like it to be in order to be competing for a championship, but it's light years ahead of where they were a season ago, and this is the team that deserves those lofty expectations. Now, can they live up to them? We'll see. I mean, you got to go play the schedule and play your best on 12 Saturdays. But man, I don't see the giant concern with depth on this team. A year ago, I did. This one, I don't see it.
I'm horrible at phrasing questions. I would often ask you, are you surprised Garrett Nussmeyer is still on the roster? So let me phrase it differently. I am surprised Garrett Nussmeyer stayed at LSU. He could have been a starter, maybe even in Tuscaloosa or Auburn or anywhere else that he chose to go to. You're well sourced, so I know it didn't surprise you. Why is Garrett Nussmeyer still on the LSU roster?
I would go so far as to say that had Jaden Daniels not gotten hurt in the SEC championship game and Garrett Nussmeyer not played that second half, Garrett Nussmeyer would not be back at LSU. If you go listen to that post-game press conference, you'll hear Brian Kelly talk about Jaden Daniels, Garrett Nussmeyer, and kind of in passing, and by the way, and Walker Howard, who was the 5-star signee a year ago, who's son of Jamie Howard, who's played at LSU. And I think in that moment before that game, I would go so far as to say that Garrett Nussmeyer was going to leave and probably already had his destinations narrowed. But LSU had that opportunity to put eyes on him in that situation. They wanted to keep him. They made the promise that he would get first-team reps, which he did. They alternated series, he and Jaden, in the bowl game. And I think that satisfied Garrett enough to stay and wait for his opportunity and come and compete. But the residual effect that I think Brian Kelly and the staff didn't expect was they never thought Walker Howard would leave. And for Walker, he didn't want to be a scout team quarterback for another year. Look, he went to Ole Miss, where they had Jackson Dart and they signed Spencer Sanders. So he's not going somewhere where he's guaranteed a spot to play, but he wanted a chance to be able to compete and get better and not just be a scout team quarterback. So, that was the trade-off. That was the collateral damage. Garrett's a good player and he's a talented guy and he's got a really high ceiling. He's got to purge some of the mistakes out of his game. But you can all see the ability when it's there. But I agree. If you had told me at kickoff of the SEC championship game is Garrett Nussmeyer back in 2023, I would have told you no. But that game was the thing that changed that conversation.
He is Matt Moscona. You can follow him on Twitter there at Matt Moscona. You can hear him throughout the state of Louisiana on ESPN radio there. Matt, we greatly appreciate the time, man. Always fun talking with you.
Okay, guys. Have a great day.
All right, buddy. You too, Matt, with us on the JohnstonRVCenter.com hotline.